Good morning. My name is Nader Ahmadi, and I'm the Director General at the Swedish Agency for Work Environment Expertise. On behalf of our agency, which is also the Swedish focal point for the EU OSHA, I do hereby welcome our speakers, experts, and audience, both those who are in Sweden and our European friends, to this awareness-raising webinar for musculoskeletal disorders. Times are, as Bob Dylan sang, changing. Our way of working is also changing along with it. Today, a very few of us are in the live studio in Stockholm. Most of us are probably at home or somewhere else keeping social distance right now and have just logged into this event online as a part of their everyday work. This is the new normal. Teleworking instead of office work, webinar instead of seminar, a new daily routine. The times, they really are changing. The Swedish Agency for Work Environment Expertise collects, compiles, and communicates knowledge of what constitutes a good work environment and how that correlates with employee health, productivity, profitability, and attractive workplaces. We evaluate and analyze effects of implemented reforms and government initiatives within the domain of work environment and identify and address knowledge gaps. We also follow up and contribute to the development of occupational health organizations. Millions of workers across Europe suffer from work-related musculoskeletal disorders. We know that about 3 in every 5 workers in the European Union report MSD complaints. Work-related MSDs can greatly impact individuals' quality of life and ability to work and are among the most common causes of disability, sick leave, and retirement. Prevention is essential. Today, we will dive into some new statistics from us here in Sweden and see which industries and individuals are most at risk. We will also present results of a new publication from us at the Swedish Agency for Work Environment Expertise. Its name is Physical Work Environment for Health, Well-being, and Performance. The authors will be here to present their report. During the afternoon, we will listen to some examples of risk assessment tools from the Swedish Work Environment Authority and get a real-life example on how you can work preventive. Another part of our mission is to look ahead and collect and provide information about the working life of tomorrow. At 9:30, we will hear about the future of risk assessment in hand-intensive repetitive work. We hope that you will find today's webinar useful and interesting. Again, a very warm welcome from us at the Swedish Agency for Work Environment Expertise. And now to the studio in Stockholm and Sten Hage, today's moderator. Thank you.
Most welcome to this webinar. As Director General said, this is a preparation for the EU OSHA campaign, Healthy Workplaces, Lighten the Load. This campaign will start fall this year, this autumn 2020. The campaign will go on until the year of 2022. My name is Sten Hage. I will, during the day, introduce the speakers. I will transfer questions from you, the audience, to the speakers and have them answer your questions carefully and precisely. And I will also try to make sure that discussions and the lectures will fit in a fairly tight time schedule we're working with today. But I must say, we are so happy because you are a large audience. We have counted more than 400 people to this webinar from many countries all over Europe. Most welcome, all of you. But with me today, we also will have others except for lecturers. And I will mention certainly Cecilia Berlin. Cecilia Berlin is based in Göteborg. She's working at the Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg, and she will come in and give us comments on the lectures we have heard. Cecilia will also have a lecture of her own together with a colleague of hers, but that comes later during this morning. Cecilia, are you there? And could you introduce yourself with a few words?
I am certainly here. Good morning from Gothenburg. And hello to all of our audience who are out there in Europe and in Sweden listening. Thanks for tuning in. So my name is Cecilia Berlin, and I am a researcher and teacher at Chalmers here in Gothenburg. And my research area is production ergonomics. So my background is mostly industrial applications and looking at ergonomics, both the organizational, cognitive, and physical kind in factories. That's been my main focus. So my role today will be to listen actively to the different presentations and offer a few comments. And I suppose it's slightly filler in case we don't get our inboxes full, but I really hope that our audience will ask questions to all of our presenters through the email function that we have set up. So I'm kind of here as a compliment, and I hope that the dialogue will be with everyone listening.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. We will talk later, because now it's time for our first lecture. It's about statistics, it's about figures, and the speaker is Minke Varsell. Please, Minke, come. I know you are expert on ergonomics, and but please introduce yourself with a few more words, where you work on, and then we will hear your lecture.
Thank you, Sten. My name is Minke Varsell, and like you said, I'm working at the Department for Regulations at the Swedish Work Environment Authority. And today I've got the pleasure to talk about statistics. We newly published a new report on the statistics on the work-related diseases and accidents. And I will especially look on the MSD part of that. Which is interesting to have as a common platform all together while we are listening to the other speakers during the day. So thank you very much.
But Minke, before you start, I would like to tell the audience how they could pose questions to you and to the other lecturers during the day.
Yes.
So this is the way to do it. If you have questions, we hope you have questions, and we wish to have questions to be answered from the speakers. You mail the questions, you see the mail address behind me, right here, and please write down your questions, mail them. All questions will be handled without mentioning the sender. I will read the questions to Minke, to the other lecturers, but I will just tell the questions, not who has sent them. So please listen carefully and send us questions during the lecture. Now, Minke, please give us your speech and your interesting facts, I guess.
Thank you. Right. As we will have this 3 years campaign on MSDs and prevention of MSDs. It's of course interesting to see what figures are looking like in Sweden, but also as an introduction to have a little look at European figures. And Nader was already mentioning it, that it's still a rather challenge, the rather big challenge to prevent MSDs, musculoskeletal disorders, in Europe. And even though there are a lot of activities and changes in the labor market, like digitalization, still when following up, we can see that the change between 2015 and 2010 is rather small, even though the figures go to the proper direction. If we then go to the Swedish statistics, we have just published this report yesterday, so probably you have been hearing about it. You can see that we had an increase. You can't see it on this picture really, but there was an increase mainly coming from female reports, where we can also observe that about 70% of all reports are caused by musculoskeletal disorders or organizational and social factors in work environment. And it's also acknowledged the combination of the two. So there has been during time like a development where the MSD in amount is decreasing while the organizational and social factors are increasing. But it's also a matter on how all these reports are coded. So that's why I want to say that you always have to take these two together when you are working with prevention. When you look and compare female and male reports, you can see that there are rather more women than men who write the reports. And you also can see that women relatively report more organization social caused diseases, but still it's women who report the most MSDs as well. So that makes it that it has sense to have a gender perspective when you're working with prevention. When we look at the statistics from this report, we can see that there were like we have the fatal accidents, which have been less. This is the wrong picture. Some way we have got the wrong figures on this picture. That's a pity. But there were 36 fatal accidents, and it's the combination of the reports from accidents and diseases together is like 110,000 reports. And well, you could say that's a lot of reports, but knowing that we have about 5 million people on the labor market, it's just a figure. But we also know from other research that about 30% of all employees are having complaints of either fatigue or musculoskeletal disorders, and are still working, and they are not made visible by reports. So that makes that these figures in the reports are actually a little bit of an iceberg. And I just want to use the words of Malin Lohille Karlsson, who was a researcher at Uppsala University. She says that poor working environment or lacking conditions reduces human production capacity by 30 to 40%. And this makes that poor working environment costs 5 times as much as sick leave does. So, and knowing that most people with problems still are at work, this makes it really emphasizing that you really have to focus on prevention of MSDs. When we look at the actual report, we find that the accidents which are reported by women are mainly reported from industries in wholesale or preparation of poultry meat and construction. And it's a lot about manual handling. But these are relative figures, and you have to remember that the most of the reports are still coming from health and social care, as these figures really say something about the amount of people, even though they're working like 1 of 1,000 at these different professions. On male side, you find it's often when accidents, when you have an accident, you get accidents because of you get loss of control of instruments or machines, or it can also be the physical handling which is making the strain too big. I just want to mention some examples on the accident reports where this is, I call her Anna. She arrived at the customer who had pushed the alarm due to a fall, and the customer was lying on the floor and had a lot of pain in his knees. Anna, who was at the time alone, she alerted a colleague for support, as there needed to be 2 in order to be able to do a safe lifting procedure. And the answer she got was that she would have to wait for a while before the colleague could arrive. The customer though was in pain, and the staff felt sorry for the customer, and so what happened, she did the transfer by herself, and while lifting she feels a strong back pain. So this is an example of one of the reports. Another one is about an accident happened at a preschool yard in connection with putting children in a bike, which is intended for 6 children to sit in. 4 children were already sitting there when the 5th was coming, but the bike was rolling forward, and when it was straightened up again, the employee makes a twist with the body, causing pain from the tailbone up all the way to the neck. And the third one, from vibrations, working with vibrations for a long time, gave tintlings and spasms in finger joints, and the person was also sensitive for cold. While the 4th one was having to move a bearing house weighing like 800 kgs with a pallet loader, and it was heavy, too narrow. It twisted his knee and got severe pain in the knee, which caused a period of sick leave. When we then go to the statistics of the work-related diseases, we find these reports coming mainly from factory production and production of vehicles, while women mainly get these disorders because of manual work and constant strain and also tiredness. We can see that on the male side there is also the food industry, which is mentioned as one of the areas where the reports come from, and also manufacturing of heavy vehicles. Some more examples of the individual behind the figures, just giving you the feeling of what kinds of symptoms you really can find in these reports, and also among people working at our working life. Is an overload injury in the shoulder. The complaints are likely caused by handling frequently repeated and heavy loads with the arm above the shoulder level, when the dishwasher hood is to be opened and closed manually, and Karen got in touch with a physical therapist for treatment. Another one where back pain is due to heavy lifting and poor working postures caused by the lack of double staffing during much of working day. And then the last one, which is a long one, but still gives interesting information about a modern way of organizing work. In May 2013, we had to move to new premises, which now are our current workplace. We got new equipment, new furnishings. The desk we got was not practical, and all opticians complained about the tables to the organization. We got to reply that the interior of the store could not be replaced, as the decisions on interior design are made centrally and should apply to all stores that are part of the chain. After a while, I began to experience pain in my right shoulder, and the colleagues complained of pain in the right hip. Our manager engaged an ergonomist to assess our work environment. According to the expert, our desks were not user-friendly, and they didn't meet the requirements of Swedish law. The manager decided to replace the tables, but for me, the damage was already gone. The pain in my shoulder increased over time, and I was given my diagnosis, shoulder impingement syndrome. So these are some examples showing the people behind the reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Minke. The cases you showed and told us about are very interesting, but also very horrifying in one way. So simple moves could make so much damage, actually. Anyway, we have a questions from the audience.
Yeah.
And the question is like this. If you would like to bring down figures, bring down damages, is there any certain area where you should focus your work on to make it more secure or more easy to work with, and that way sort of bring down accidental situations?
Yeah, well, I think when we talk about prevention, we always talk about working systematically. And working systematically with prevention means that it's important to really make visible where the risks for MSDs are at work. When you start doing this, it's of course very useful to have evidence-based methods to use, but also to take into account the organizational and social factors. As we have seen in statistics, that many reports actually mention both the organizational and social facts behind the reports. So never only MSD, but always the two together.
So don't forget social factors or more soft parts of sort of the working environment, if I understand you right.
Right.
Not just the hard physical part.
Exactly. It's not only the kgs, but also a matter of taking into account how much time you really have to do things, how the relations are with your colleagues, how the relations are with your superiors, and so on.
So that could also be important, even if you would like to not wound your knee or stress your arm too much.
Right.
I see. I understand. We have a general question. Please excuse me, Minke, because we have a question saying that the lectures from Minke, from others, could that be mailed? Could that be mailed to the audience? And we will say yes, that will be possible. So please ask, and we will sort of mail it to you. Everything we heard from Minke and from others, the coming lectures. Now we will hear some comments. Could you please come in, Cecilia Berlin from Chalmers in Göteborg? Have you heard the lecture? Could you give us some intelligent comments on what Minke just have told us?
I certainly have been listening, and yes, it's not from Berlin, it is by Berlin. Okay, so Minke, that was a very interesting look into statistics, which tells a lot of stories, and as a researcher, I have to reflect on the fact that statistics tend to be about very well-defined things that we can observe happening out in the occupational fields. And you mentioned this new report, and I just want to say, when you read it, are there any occupations that stick out in particular to you as particularly problematic right now?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think it's important to remember that men and women are working in different industries. And the pictures show a lot of, and point out production and manufacturing, especially in personal vehicles, production of personal vehicles. But if you look at the amount of reports coming in, 4 more are coming from health and social care, because simply more women are working there. So I think it's both important, of course, to prevent the MSDs, which you can see in the statistics at the production sites, but of course also think of how to work in a friendly way with people. And many times that's more complicated to do, as the people we're working with, they simply move, and it's not always so easy to predict all situations which can occur.
Also regarding the new report, who do you hope will act on it? Like, who is the audience for this report that should do something about the problem?
Yeah, well, I think everybody is involved in a way. Either you are a worker yourself and you want to work in a safe environment, and you could be involved in the systematic work environment or OSH management, or you are a manager and you have the responsibility to create a safe workplace, or you could be a labor representative, the safety representative at the workplace, or just a member in the labor, and you want to contribute to this development, I think everybody should be involved, really. And also we see that when we have a good cooperation, that's really where we make the best preventive results.
Sten, I'll keep asking questions till you
Please
tell me.
do.
So I was thinking about, you did mention poor working environment, and also that was a quote you used from Malin Lohela Karlsson. And I was wondering what is included in poor working environment? Is it just the things that constitute heavy physical loading, or is it wider than that?
Yeah, well, as we saw in the statistics, and I also mentioned the increase of the organizational social factors and the impact of that on also on the environment created to prevent MSD. So I think that's why you also have to widen your scopes. You don't only look at this physical load, but also take into account how the work is organized. So always when you do the preventive work, you think in this HTO perspective, the organizational perspective, the technical aids which should support the individual, and also the human person in that, the human person who has to be included into that. And I think if you use this H2 perspective, you really get everything included. And a holistic view.
Yeah. I was quite happy to see that you lifted up stories behind each individual statistic, so to speak. Most of them seem to be injuries, though. So I'm curious about how we, in the term work-related disease, can capture when you haven't injured yourself yet, but you're already like getting towards that danger zone. Is it difficult for people to report that sort of thing? Is it underreported? Like, how do we capture that part of the spectrum?
I think that's exactly what it is. Just like you mentioned, it's difficult to acknowledge also for the individual worker, because when you're working, if you remember this explanation about the hood to be pushed down with the dishwasher, that's something you do it so many times, and you do it every day. So you don't get a strain straight away, but after a while you might feel, oh gosh, I'm getting a bit stiff in my shoulder. And then when you've had some weeks of holidays, you might feel that, oh gosh, my shoulder is feeling much better now. But still you go back again after work, after your holidays, and you start working again, and it might come back. And in the end, you might end up with a stiff shoulder and not being able to get rid of that anymore. And maybe then you start writing your report. That's quite late. So it would be very good if you would get in more reports earlier. I think it would show much clearer the need of the prevention, and also to start earlier with prevention, not only when people get the problems in the shoulders, but far ahead, much earlier, really.
Please, Cecilia, I'm sorry, we are out of time for the moment. Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you very much, Minke, for your lecture.
Thank you.
And the next lecture is on assessment of repetitive work. And the speaker is Michael Forsman. He's professor. He's from the Royal Institute of Technology, based here in Stockholm. Michael will appear here soon. And please, Michael, step forward. And instead of my short introduction, would you tell us some words about yourself and your work before you start?
Thank you for the introduction. I'm a professor of ergonomics, and I've been working for a long time in this field. I've done laboratory. Which camera we're on?
Sorry?
Which camera is that? That one?
I guess it's the camera with the green dot.
There. Sorry. I've been doing a lot of different studies, both in laboratory experimental studies and field studies, and also development of analysis methods and risk assessment methods.
Michael, thank you.
And I also want to do them very simple, technically advanced, but simple to use, like a smartwatch.
Thank you. Before you start, I just would like to remind the audience about posting questions. Please use the email address you saw before. Mail questions to Michael, mail questions to other lecturers. All questions will be handled with care. We will not repeat the sender. We will just tell the questions to Michael and future lecturers. Please, Michael, the audience is yours.
Here. That's good. Okay, thank you. The title today for me is ergonomics and risk assessments of hand-intensive repetitive work. So I will start with some background, as you already actually got from Minke, and better than I do here, more. I can see on the last line, you can say that work postures, work movements, physical loads, repetitive tasks, and psychosocial conditions, and some more are all risk factors for these musculoskeletal disorders. Especially today, and for me, hand-intensive work. And there are new provisions from the Swedish Work Environmental Authority, and according to them, employers need to offer medical controls for those employees that are working with hand-intensive repetitive work. And here that is said to be rapid, sustained wrist movements against the outer positions of the joint in combination with force. That is what is going to be assessed. And furthermore, it's however, this does not apply if an in-depth assessment shows that the work does not provide an increased risk. So in the title we had also assessments, which are important. Further, when you do find that there are high risks, then you try to do an intervention. And the basic intervention phases are problem identification, idea and solution development, and the implementation. And often researchers like me want to do an evaluation after that, but that is not that frequently done by practitioners. They think that they have paid enough now to when the interventions are done. So what will happen if non-reliable methods are used for the risk assessments? Well, of course, risks may be unidentified. Non-risk may be seen as risks. Risks of different work movement may be erroneously ranked in the wrong order. And if you do the intervention afterwards, the evaluations might be wrong. So the risk assessment, I see that as the base when you do work with the environmental risks, the work risks, the risk assessment is the base. And if we as researchers for a long time, we have used technical measurements, and you see here there are cables, and it looks complicated. So we will start today with observational methods, and after lunch for the Swedish audience there will be some more about how they are used. I will simply introduce them here. There are many of them. There are at least 30, I think maybe 40, that are well known of these different methods. Here is one example, and this thing it looks like a pointer, but I can't point here for you, so we need to follow each other. And here to the left you see observer assessments. The observer that is the ergonomist somewhere in a factory, at a job, in a cleaner maybe. And you look on the questions and you try to rate 2 or 3 different answers. Among them you pick one. It's hard even for me to see an example. There. When the task is performed, are the hands below the waist or height? There are also questions about the hand, wrist hand-intensive work, almost straight wrist, deviated or bent wrist. those things might be hard to see when someone is working. Here is another in a project I will talk about. We use this kind of movies so that you have different angles, because that's another risk that you see when you observe someone. You see only one angle, and that might be the wrong angle to if it's not here but here. It's harder to see these and answer these different questions. When you have filled in that, you go to this computational page, and with all of this you get the final score in the bottom row, and there is a interpretation table for that, so you can see the risks of these different scores that you get. And this is basically how most of those observational methods works. Here's a new observational method from KTH, and quite new. It's been around for 3 years or so, and we are proud because this has been used, and the last name here, Kalle, was a part of his dissertation, and he used very many references. So this is very well based by latest references and latest study concerning exposure of different kinds and a response, the physiological response in terms of disorders and pain. This is used and downloaded in 86 different countries, and it's becoming more and more popular and has a great use in Sweden too. But again, it is based mainly on observation. In this method, you can there are also include measurement for pulsing force, where you actually measure, which is easy, and when it's just the pull or push forces are quite easy to measurement. And there are it looks like this. You have first more simple and easier ramp 1 for screening purposes, and then you have ramp 2, as you heard before, in-depth analysis, and then you get the results as a in a visual way. You see what is green and red there, and then you have support for doing those finding solutions within this method. But when it again comes to observational methods, in a review study from 2010, and most of the today existing methods there are before that, they were included in that, and Takala co-workers found a need for further studies of their reliability, and so we did a project for studying reliability, and in that we had 12 experienced ergonomists who were given 10 different video recording tasks to assess, and what you could not see on those videos they got in hand in terms of other data, as you see there on the slides. Then we repeated their assessments after 2 months later to get also the retest validity, reliability. So we used 6 different established method, and the last one here, maybe not internationally established, but it's the method from the Swedish authorities. But before they were taught and trained in those methods, they did one first assessment with no specific method. So they was just given the question, and I will show you an example of that. Now we made this video not 3-dimensional, if not from 3 different angles, but this is to be a bit easier to look at. And the question in this case then is, what is the risk for right shoulder disorders in this job? And what I will try to play this film, and what do you think? Yeah, what is the risk for future shoulder disorders in this job? Is it low? Is it moderate or high? So you have to decide. If you were here, I would force you to raise your hand in one of these. So you can do it home where you sit. You put on green, yeah, red, yellow. And we got now a number of hands in the air. When we asked the ergonomist, these were the answers we got in this specific case. And if we looked on all videos and all different body parts, we see in the majority of cells in this table, there are both red and green in the same cell. So some thought for the right shoulders and a specific job that there was low risk, others thought high risk. So just with your own knowledge and experience, that does not give a reliable method of interpretation, of assessment. And then this is another case with a established OKRA method from Italy. And also here, when we compare the different ergonomists that's on the different rows with the different work tasks, videos in the columns, there are often that the different ergonomists results in different colors. So when we do calculations in a statistical way called linearly weighted kappa, we get these results, and 0 here is no agreement above what can be expected by chance. So there are some being looking as they are more reliable than others, and the total risk in the bottom, that is just when you use your own experiment. Harm here, for instance, looks like it has a higher reliability, but when we looked into that, it's dependence on the time, the work time with that tasks. And that was a thing that the ergonomists didn't need to assess, but they got it on paper. So when we looked in the harm and the other methods for what they actually assessed from the videos, they were all quite low, not that much above what you could expect by chance. So again, looking on technical methods, as I said, with these cables and the analysis programs that you use after that, that is too difficult to be given and takes too much time for practitioners in real life. So we try to make it easier. And some years ago, we tested. As you see on the arm, the black thing is like a USB memory, and it gives you the arm angle. You put it there, and it saves that in its own USB memory. So afterwards, you can transfer that to the computer, and you can do the analysis in a half easy way of program that you get from us. So this is a trial to make it easier. But still, that cable, and this we did a validation. We Camilla, as you see here, was a part of her dissertation in Lund, and she do simulating painting, simulating cleaning, and computer work, and simulating thinking. That's the one to the right, and the method showed to be valid, and this is the easy to use program manual that we have, and we have another method that with an Excel program. But still, you need to connect it. You need to find a file, and this method was used actually by a journalist who used it on their own cleaner and got result that she understood. So it is possible. But to get further and to make it easier, we have done an iPhone that is free to download. You can find it. It's called ErgoR-meter. And we have validated that, and it's very valid. It's more so than the research methods. These are the validation experiments. And you find it ErgoR-meter after you have downloaded, install it on your iPhone. We have done a version for Android, and it used to work, but now in the update, we have some problem there which we are trying to fix. So this is ErgoR-meter. You click there, and you make a new measurement. You fill in a name, and then you create, and you get this screen on your iPhone, and you hold your arm straight down, and then you push calibrate, and then it goes to 0 or almost 0. Then you start a measurement, you do the work, the person does the work, and then I need to say that when you get the result, do you know if that is good or bad? If you get 17 degrees per second, is that high or not? And by the help here, we have recommendations from Lund, from our colleagues in Lund, who have done this for a long time, done these advanced measurements and investigation of the health status among the workers, and they have seen associations, and lately they have done analysis on an individual level, and as you see in the final conclusion here, based on the findings, we propose threshold limit values for upper arm and wrist velocity. So to measure velocity is essential, and that is among the hardest thing to observe. So now we have that in the ErgoR-meter. We have velocity, so when you click on afterwards, you click on the name, you get the results, and to the right there are those recommended action limits. So you can measure easily with the ErgoR-meter, and you get the results to compare your measurement with. We have also done a smart t-shirts that should be so smart so that it's easy to do the measurement, and here you see the t-shirt, and it's an app, an Android app that runs the measurements. So you get the measurements in the same way, and you measure the arms and the back, and then so there are these angular sensors in small pockets within the t-shirt. Lately, we have tried to measure the wrist velocity with sensors too, and we have validated a method. So here are Jenny and Josephine in their thesis work, and they are similar. So to the gold standard motion tracking optical system. That's what you saw. Those markers, the reflective markers, are the gold standard measurement. So they are similar, but they are not that good enough. So we are trying to find other sensors, and we have done a test where the velocity should be 0 between two sensors, and there were and they look good, and this is another kind, black sensors. So in the new project where we collaborate, where with so it's quite large. It's large. It's all occupational and environmental medicine clinics in Sweden are involved, and we are now still developing the method to measure the wrist velocity. And in the fall, or whenever we can be welcome on workplaces again. We will do risk assessments, measurements in 10 or 12 or more, together with these clinics around in the different regions of Sweden. 7 different clinics are in the project to get different values from different occupational groups. We're also included we work together with MINAC. We represent Sweden in a European project where the aim of identifying standards for doing measurements like that, so that they will be done the same way in all European countries. Oh, no, that thank you should be. Oh, good. To conclude, the use of systematic methods are important and gives you a higher reliability than just trying to see with your own experience. Even if you have seen a lot before, it's hard to do these assessments. And there are many observational methods for repetitive work, and you will be seeing those more in Swedish this afternoon. But now there are new methods that can be used, and we are working on doing those more easy, so they give you the result and they are easy to start and easy to understand.
Thank you, Michael. You know what? We have had a flow of questions on your speech.
Wow.
So we have 5 minutes, and I will read the questions to you. And please be brief in your answers. First question is like this. Do you harmonize the measurements in Europe?
Well, yeah, which I try to tell by the last slide there. We are within the PEROSH partnership among European research and safety PEROSH. Yeah. So we are a number of countries working together to standardize the methods, and we have done 2 reports. The second report was about arm elevation angle measurements and standards.
Next question. Could you use the quick exposure check and sort of just look at one arm or a hand or a wrist to make an assessment of that repetitive work for just that part of your body?
Yes, you can. You can. Then you should only focus on those. But there, as in harm and in other, it is difficult. So if I ask you, when is my hand, wrist in a almost neutral posture? When is it bent towards the outer limit? You should say.
No. Well, it's above. Too much.
And that's when you see it in a perfect profile. So when I work like this, then you should assess that during my work. So it is difficult, and that's why we see low reliability. But still, with these observational methods, you get a knowledge, and you see what different risk factors are there to assess, and you do that as still an assessment. But you need to know that the assessment is not, well, it's not that high reliability. It is hard, and sometimes you can do it together with colleagues from the same film, increasing their reliability. Yeah.
I have another question on the ramp method. Do you recommend to use the ramp method for intensive work with hands?
Yes.
It's recommended to use that one.
Well, the method was developed together with practitioners and together with large companies in Sweden, and basically because they needed a method to do assessment for work not only on the line. They had already one method for the line work. The assembly work, but this should cover both line work and non-tacted, non-timed, non-cyclic order picking or other work.
More questions about the ramp method. How do you ensure that the observations are done with objectivity? And the following question on the same question actually is, why not use technologies like three-dimensional cameras instead of the ramp method?
Yeah, well, that is the question for me too. That's my research area in a whole. Why not find other ways of doing that? And cameras can be used, but it's not that without markers. If you have markers that the camera follows, that you increase the reliability.
Yes.
But without that, they are not, especially in this dimension, trustful yet. But there should be. Then again, if you still have to be there, how long do you follow the person during a full workday with the camera? There is a, if you are outside observing someone, maybe you do that for 10 minutes. How long would you stand in front of me when I'm working?
Yes.
10 minutes, and that should represent the full workday. So there is another source of error or source of variance.
Thank you. Could you mention something? Have you studied if the costs for society, if you compare that to costs for those who have to leave work because they are sick or been injured in work? Have you compared these two amounts of cost together? Would it be less costly for society to improve working environment and have people more in jobs and not being injured, or is it good as it is?
There are examples and there are studies where those things are calculating and proved to be efficient to do improvements of the work. There are quite many of those, but it is also a difficulty because when you improve and when people are less sick listed, takes some time. So and if you do a lot of things at the same time, it is hard. But there are good examples of where that is shown.
Thank you, Michael. There are actually one or two questions more, but we do it this way. These questions will be answered on the website of our host website later after this webinar. Now it's time for Cecilia in Gothenburg to come in. Please, Cecilia, I guess you have heard what Michael have said. I'm sure you have intelligent and interesting comments on what Michael have told us. So please come in and talk to us.
Let's not oversell me. Okay, so Michael, thank you very much for that. I am very fascinated by anything that has to do with assessing hand ergonomics in particular. My research field, which is very much looking at cycle times of car assembly, tends to show that a lot of the problems are specifically with using your hands as hammers, basically, or using them as pliers, basically taking everything that a tool should do and still doing it with the hands. And that is very high. That is very high wear on the human body, and a lot of young people who possibly don't feel the pain immediately are at high risk. But I want to get into a few particulars of the presentation you just had. I'm sure we have an audience that are not just researchers, so you've talked a lot about methods for assessment being reliable, but you also have talked about them being valid. When can we call a method valid? Like what's the tick box?
Well, valid is as I see it, the predictional reliability. So if you use the method and it is becomes red, then it should, to be valid, actually those workers should in some years develop more pain than the green ones. Then you can say, and in that way, all methods of these are valid. Because if I compare in my data assessment people working like Sten, just standing, talking most of the time, with those that you study, they will have more pain and they will have a higher risk score. So it's harder when you compare different workers doing similar things and then get a valid method in that kind of comparison. But it's not hard to get a method that has a prediction validity at all. So yeah. It is a difficult field because Sten can still claim that he did work in his garden or somewhere and get some, and people get pain without even working at all. So it is tricky when it comes to these musculoskeletal disorders. It's easier with vibrating tools or so. Then you
Absolutely.
get more evident.
Cecilia, we are short of time. Do you have a short question more or comment?
I'll take a comment then. When I teach these methods to my students, we talk a lot about posture, forces, and time as a kind of gauge of, can you see what the problem is with this loading? And in that case, choose a method that can capture that dimension well. And I just generally want to hear you, Mikael, comment on, do you feel like there is enough different methods that can target posture, force, and time in such a way that we can cover the three? And is RAMP covering all three equally? Like, what's your comment?
RAMP covers those different factors, but the hard thing is that, as we showed, that those things that the ergonomists were assessing from the videos, they found different results. They rated those questions in those three items that answering differently. So it is hard, and as I said, if you look on the posture, when is my neck bent forward more than 20 degrees, and that is when you see it there, and if you see it here, and it's hard, and especially wrist movements are hard. There is no really definition, and in those methods that they are asking how many times actions per minute are, but the hands in your kind of production engineering, production ergonomics, you do different things. So what is the definition? Is if I do this, but then if I do that, is that a repeated task or not? So it is hard, and for repetition we had also low reliability in the assessments. But so they might be covered, and they are covered in most of those methods, because HARM also covers those. But it is hard to rate by observing.
I must say thank you very much, Cecilia. Welcome back soon. And Mikael, thank you very much for your lecture.
Thank you.
Now, next point will not be a lecture of the normal kind. We will have a short explanation why we have to move and not being just sitting in our chairs in our offices. Please, Sofia Bernard, please come. You are from our host agency, the Swedish Agency for Work Environment Expertise. And please introduce yourself and the exercise you're going to show us.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. My name is Sofia Bernhard, and I am an HR manager at the Swedish Agency for Work Environment Expertise. So my background is in the behavioral science field, and I have a master degree in pedagogy, focusing on leadership and learning.
So why is it dangerous to sit in your office chair, even if it's well designed and economically correct, sort of?
Because when you sit for a very long time and don't move your body, you start having health problems. It's not only when you make heavy lifts in production industry, for example, or healthcare.
So now you're going to show us some exercises we all should do, we here in the studio and also all the audience.
Yes, it's very good to, like, once an hour, stand up and move your body. It's not important exactly how you do it, just that you do it. And it's nothing difficult, or it's not hard to do. The hard part is to remember to do it, because we get stuck at our desk a lot. So,
please, show us.
Thank you. So I'm going to play sitting at my desk here, working as usual. And I want to say to you that if even whether you are in productional industry or in healthcare or sit in an office, these exercises that I'm going to show you are very good for your health and an investment for the future as well. So it's preventing healthcare issues as well. If you just follow me, you need some space. I don't know if you're sitting at home or in a workplace, but you can just start. If you sit working, you can do most exercises sitting down if you like. So you can also do it while you are working. Just move your feet like this, and then you can change the direction. Just move them around and play with it. If you want to, if you have high heels, you can take them off. And then maybe it's good to just stretch your arms up, face the ceiling. Are you with me? This is really nice. And then we're going to stand up to do some exercises. Okay. Oh no, we're going to sit down. And we stand up and sit down. And make sure you tighten the muscles. Everybody in the studio is joining. That's great. So if you do this every time you are going to rise up from your chair or sit down, you're making a huge investment in your health. So now we're standing up. Just going to move this a bit. And then you just raise your hands towards the ceiling and go back as far as you can. This is not a contest. And look up in the ceiling and then gently roll down. And roll up. And if the headset gets you stuck in your computer, you can just take it off because you can just follow the movements. Think about activating the core and the back of your body. And go up. And go down and stay for a bit. And you gently roll up. And now we're going to pick some apples. This is a great way to stretch the side of your body. And they are very, very high up. And then you just take your hands down and you tighten your whole body and lift your shoulders up like this, even your face really. And relax. So you feel you lower your shoulders and up and down and up. Good job. Okay, so now you're a bit loose. You can just loosen up a bit. And then you put your hands on your shoulders. Make sure they're down. And gently just roll them like this. Make sure you have a nice posture. Try to suck your stomach in so you don't end up here. So tighten your body. And the other way. And then you go back and look at your hand. Are you with me? This is nice, right? And all the way back. Is it working?
Very good.
Very good. Okay, so now we're going to do the bow and arrow thing. I'm not going to shoot you for real, but I'm going to stand on the side. Also here, think about tightening your body and getting the bow and the arrow, and then you go. And you want to activate your shoulders and the back. And then you move. You grip the bow, the arrow. See? So you really tighten the muscles. And on the way back, you relax. Okay. So now we're going to also get the legs involved, because when we're sitting on the legs, there is serious damage to the blood flow through your legs when you just sit down all days. And this is also good for the core and the back of your body. So when you're doing this, think about your posture. And now you just take a step and go down and back. And the other one, I'm going to stand sideways so you can see that you're aiming to have this knee straight down. And be careful about this leg. So you should have 90 degrees. And if you think that you have hard keeping your balance, like you saw me now, you can just do the step a bit sideways. So then it's easier with the balance. Can you feel it? Great. So, and now we're going to do left side first. So you're going to the left, and here we have both training to get your blood flow increasing, and you have a stretch. So just go like this, and do not pass the knee here. And then hold your core. And here you can stretch for as long time as you like. Okay. So now I want to stretch my muscle here. Are you with me? You can hold on to something if you have to. You can hold on to me. This is hard. And you can do it so much as is possible for you. Okay. So now when you're going to go back to your desk and you sit down again and you're going to start work. And now I'm going to stand up for a bit. Okay? And then you can do this 5 times when you're going to sit down. And if you want to have some more exercise, you can choose to go up on your toes and tighten. Or you can even make a small jump. So there is a number of variation to these exercises.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
I'm sorry
much.
to say we have to finish because we have to go further.
Yes, and you don't have to do all of these at the same time. You can do 1 or 2 and you're home. Okay?
Thank you very much, Sofia.
Thank you. Bye.
Now it's time for Cecilia and for her colleague to come in and hold their speech. Cecilia and Maral, are you with us? Cecilia, we have met during the morning hours. Maral, we haven't met before. I know you're working closely to Cecilia at the Chalmers University of Technology. Please introduce yourself. Det låter i Stockholm som ni inte har satt på era mikrofoner, kan det stämma?
All right, can you hear us now?
Yeah, thank you very much. So we do it this all over again. Maral, we haven't met you before during the morning hours. Could you please introduce yourself shortly?
Yes, thank you. My name is Maral Babapour Chafi. I am a researcher within the area of workplace design and evaluation at Chalmers, together with Ceci, and also at the Institute of Stress Medicine at the region Västra Götaland.
Now, please have your speech now, and then we follow with some questions and comments as we have done before. Please, the audience and the time is yours.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. One thing that might be worth mentioning is that we're also both at the Division of Design and Human Factors, and that's going to end up influencing a lot of what we're going to present today. So we are here to present the results of our knowledge review that is called Physical Work Environment for Health, Well-Being and Performance, a Systematic Review. And we did this at the mission of the Swedish Work Environment, SAWI, Swedish Agency for Work Environment Expertise, sorry. So this is based on a report that was very recently published. And just yesterday, the English version of the report was made available. It is now available at www.sawi.se under publications. And the Swedish version has been online since February. And something that we will get back to is that a lot of our review work is in appendices that are still being translated, but that will be coming soon. And a lot of it, if you can sort of guess your way through the Swedish, might still be accessible. But all of that is on the web links that we show here. And we want to explain that we have some intentions for who this should be useful for. We wanted our target audience to be people who can do something about physical work environments and influence them. So first of all, practitioners who influence the design of physical workplaces. With this, we mean designers, ergonomists, workplace, work environment engineers, and then also workplace and equipment users, so that they get a say, that they get to take part of the knowledge of what kinds of workplace equipment and work site designs that can be helpful and useful. We wanted to target purchasers who influence procurement processes, because very often, as Minke brought up in her presentation, they have a lot of power over how the workplace gets designed. We want to target policymakers so they understand all these different factors that contribute to healthy work. And then finally, educators of different sorts: architecture, workplace design, product design, process preparation, or production management. We want to make sure that these audiences can get a part of these different kinds of knowledge. So the agency gave us a mission to summarize knowledge regarding factors that create sound and healthy workplaces. And the Swedish mission included the word friskfaktorer, which literally translates to good health factors. And to be frisk in Swedish kind of implies that you're in a very good state of health. It really resonates with this salutogenic idea that it's not just the absence of illness, it's also that you're in a state of well-being and meaningfulness, and that your health is in a very constructive and positive state. In order for us to sort of not end up in the wrong corner with just translating it to health factors, which could be a bigger span, we decided to translate this to English as workplace well-being, to kind of keep the focus to the workplace being a intentionally designed place where work happens. So we interpreted this mission as a design problem. How can we plan, create, and maintain physical environments that people use in work activities? So, of course, there's a lot of other ways to make sure that physical loading at work happens in a less harmful way, but we have decided to focus on what is made available to the worker to enable their work. So we focus on design properties in the physical work environment that can be changed. And those changes, in our mind, should be targeting workplace well-being outcomes. So they are written as research questions in the report, but we see them as guiding questions, and they kind of give you, the audience, a feel for how we looked for things and how we decided to keep some things and discard others. So the first one is, how has physical work environment been designed and developed since the beginning of the millennium to promote workplace well-being? And the second one is, what principles, technologies, methodologies, processes, working methods, and good examples of workplace design can lead to the thing we're after, well-being and system performance?
Now I'm going to walk you through the methodology that we had for conducting this literature review. The first step for us involved defining inclusion and exclusion criteria, based on the POE model. That means that we defined our population as both blue and white collar healthy workers over 18, and also including the aging population, who had work and workspaces assigned by an employer. That means that we excluded young adults or children, we excluded injured population, but also, for instance, freelancers. The exposure that we were interested in was workplace design as a whole or as its components. But we excluded indoor environmental qualities such as temperatures. We also excluded work from home, even though it's very important nowadays. And in addition, we excluded interventions that were on individual behavior level, on psychosocial levels, or organizational leadership levels. We were, as an exposure, we were also interested in work environment trends, such as new ways of working and design process factors that influence the outcome of workplace properties. The outcomes that we were interested in and included were both short and long-term physical, cognitive, and organizational outcomes with a focus on positive well-being and performance. That means that we excluded this larger work-life balance focus that a lot of studies have, but also we excluded a large body of literature that focused on accidents, injuries, and sick leave. The next step for us involved, based on these inclusion and exclusion criteria, to search two databases for references. We used the Scopus and Web of Science and identified 4,299 abstracts. After which we had to remove duplicates and exclude the ones that were not fulfilling our criteria. And we ended up with 446 full text papers that we reviewed, and at the end excluded an additional 120 articles. The next step involved for us to review and appraise the quality of these papers. We used three methods for this. For the empirical studies that we included, we used the McGill Mixed Methods Appraisal Tool. For the literature studies, we used the CASP tool. And for the design literature articles, we used a custom-made version that we created ourselves. At the end, we also removed the 9 additional papers. The result was for us 196 empirical and literature studies and 121 design process literature.
Mm-hmm. And I think we should mention at this stage that we had a slightly different ambition with our knowledge review, because most systematic literature reviews try to focus only on evidence of a statistical nature. I mean, that's a bit of a harsh comment, I know, but that tends to be what is seen as the highest mark of evidence. And we wanted this to be design-oriented, looking at ideas for what can be changed and how. So we had a slightly different inclusion philosophy, which made qualitative studies interesting and also mixed methods. So we didn't just look at cause and outcome kinds of research. So what we ended up with was a very large pile of included studies. And I should say articles, because we deemed that some of them weren't actually studies in their own right, but they might have been a description of how to do a design procedure or evaluation, although quite a few were combinations of proposing a procedure, but then also testing and validating it in the field. So this was a lot of material. You can see how determined we look at the prospect of reading all this material, and we tried to structure what we found in a way that we hope is accessible. So our long list, it's probably a good idea to know that we identified different study types among the empirical studies using our quality appraisal tool, which we have abbreviated the MAMAT. And those are qualitative, 3 kinds of quantitative studies, and mixed methods. So that's 5 types already there. We also identified literature studies, and some of those were systematic reviews in themselves, and we have coded those with the abbreviation L. And then the design process literature, we simply had discussions about whether something qualified as an advisory kind of article that could give input to a design process. And in our report, we have reported these separately in Appendix 2A, 2B, and 2C. So just remember these abbreviations because they will be appearing later. And if you look at our long list of included articles at some point, if you dig through our report, you will find that we have the code of the type of article out to the left-hand side, and they're grouped by type of study. We have identified what kind of occupational area that they target, so mostly knowledge work, industrial work, healthcare work, or others, we might say. And we've also done a quality assessment that you can see on the right-hand side. And it's just moving quickly, so you won't have a chance to get stuck on anything, but there's a lot to be read here. Depending on how you cut the cake, you could say that the contents were very different. You could segment it by where the study was situated. So we had a lot of material that was out in the field studying actual work being done in the context that was under business as usual. We also had a portion that was laboratory studies in a controlled environment. We had some studies that were cross-sectional questionnaire studies, and then we had literature studies. We could also segment this by what was studied. We saw some work site evaluations taking account of the whole workplace and how it functioned as a coherent system. We saw specific product evaluations for different types of occupations. We found a lot of risk mapping. So even if we intentionally tried to cut away the problem-focused literature about injuries, risk mapping still happened to come into the sample. We looked at a lot of interventions, and because the question was asked of us, we tried to see if anything was said about aging. As you can see, it's a rather small proportion that came along here, but a few good statements were taken from that. And we're going to get more into what types of occupations were included, because we kind of did a large-scale segmenting just to kind of get up into critical mass for each of these. And I think it's worth mentioning that if our target was friskhet, as in workplace well-being, if you search through the literature on what that actually contains, we found a span of different things that could be included as an outcome of working with wellness, if you can put it that way. So not just well-being and reduced stress and feeling just generally relaxed and restored and engaged. It was also things like performance and generally being able to contribute at work in a creative and positive way. So we think it's important as a first result to say that the literature on workplace well-being outcomes has to contain the whole span of all of these ideas for it to be fair. So when we break down our literature, we see that our four main areas of occupations are industrial work, knowledge work, healthcare work, and then we've sort of made an other category to save time here. The industrial work typically includes factories, assembly work, process industry. We included construction industry here, again, to kind of get up into critical mass. And some of the types of studies that we saw were physical ergonomics evaluation methods, evaluations of specific tools, like in this case, pliers with rubber grips and so on. We saw a study of biomechanical assessment of rebar tying in construction, and we saw entire production system design studies. So there's quite a width among these different industrial work contents. We've segmented all of our occupational categories into how many of the contributions were worksite evaluations, product evaluations, different types of focus on the left-hand side there. And on the other hand, we also saw that they were targeting certain outcomes in order to land in some sort of advice for the reader. And some of these overlap, which is why the 43 contributions move in both directions, you might say. The takeaways from here are that the industrial work literature is largely focused on injury risk prevention and reducing heavy physical loading. And most of what we found was risk mapping, product evaluations, or worksite evaluations. We also took a look at the design process related contributions, and quite a few are related to industrial work. And of those, we see a lot of use of simulations to assess workplace ergonomics or injury risks.
A large bulk of the studies that we included were from the knowledge work occupations. That means office environments and facilities that are designed and created for knowledge workers to carry their activities. And those studies included workplaces from both public and private sector, but also from academia and laboratory environments. These studies were either on a very holistic level and evaluated implementations of office environmental changes, such as implementing activity-based workspaces. And some studies looked at how active sitting and different types of chairs impact sedentary work and physical activity of knowledge workers. And there were quite a lot of studies that combined office ergonomics training and different kind of chair interventions and testing different types of chair designs. We also found a couple of studies that looked at employees that have upper extremity pains and how design can alleviate and mitigate those types of risks. We can say from the knowledge work category, we can say that a large part of these studies were worksite assessments. That means studying a office change on a macro design level, while about 25 of these studies looked at a specific product and assessed, for instance, office chairs or different types of data entry devices, such as a keyboard, for instance. And you see on the right-hand side that these studies looked at different kinds of outcomes, such as injury risks, prevention, performance, health promotion, but also some of them combine these outcomes. A large proportion of these studies were pre and post occupancy evaluations of a major workplace intervention. And there were also plenty of studies evaluating, as I said, chairs, desks, standing work, or different kinds of data entry devices. We found some studies that focused on understanding the role that nature can play for reducing stress among knowledge workers. And we will move on to the healthcare work here.
Yes. And I'll just slip in an interesting comment here. We found that quite a lot of the nursing literature and healthcare work literature is very concerned with robustness of research design, and therefore has moved from a very quantitative kind of angle to being a little more open now to qualitative approaches. So we found that quite a lot of the literature here was under very high quality demands, which was fascinating to see. As a contrast, I would say the knowledge work area is very qualitative and very context focused, which it must be. And the industrial is kind of, well, similar to healthcare work, but not as high demands on the medical proof of exposure to outcome. But anyhow, the healthcare work literature focused on caregiver roles such as physicians, surgeons, nurses, elder care, that sort of thing. And we can see some examples here. Does patient-centered design guarantee patient safety? Effects of newly designed hospital buildings on staff perceptions? And participatory organizational intervention for improved use of assistive devices. So as you can see, kind of a mix here of approaches and philosophies kind of underlying the research being done. And of course, we've only taken out 3 randomly out of our 48. So just see it as kind of the span and not the characterization. Again, the healthcare work, quite a lot of worksite assessments, a few product assessments. And the interesting thing was that cross-sectional studies tend to appear here a little more than, for example, in industrial work. I think that examining the role of different types of caregivers has been of interest from a survey perspective. And as we can see, also here we see risk mapping, prevention, and some about performance and health promotion or combined outcomes. So just generally, I think we can observe from most of these large occupation combos that there's still a lot of risk mapping and prevention focused kind of literature, even if we looked for what is healthy, what is salutogenic. So the takeaways from the healthcare literature is that very often the focus is mostly on patient perspectives and what they feel about the environment, and not so much the caregivers and their work environment. In the cases we did find, there was a portion of literature that was about how you can encourage caregiver staff to stay on, because it is a very demanding kind of work, and there has been some realization that when they feel too much strain, they may leave the profession, which is a big loss. So some of the literature is about how to give them restoration. And then we also, like I said, found some product evaluations, very often regarding clinical or surgical equipment.
Thank you. A fourth category that we created was we called multiple occupations and miscellaneous ones. Multiple occupations were studies that could be applied to various categories and included different types of occupations. And this, for instance, included transporting unstable objects, or tools that could be applied in, as I said, different occupational categories, like screwdriver, evaluation of design of screwdrivers, or seated manual handling. That again could be applied to multiple categories. We also had a few studies that concerned evaluation of cleaning equipment. And among the miscellaneous occupational categories, we have identified studies that address offshore work, military work, oil rigs, or retail industry. And these were studies that we couldn't really create a specific group for, and that is why we have categorized them as a kind of miscellaneous occupational category. So among the multi-occupational studies, we can say that they have generally applicable findings, a lot of which focus on hand ergonomics and hand tool design. We identified a literature review that focused on reducing the risk of hand injuries. There were also quite a few design process literature with a focus on participative processes to facilitate design of such workplaces. In the miscellaneous category, we have, as we mentioned, we have cleaning industry, veterinary work, dairy and meat farming, and these are all very specific type of workplaces that put distinct physical demands on employees. And since they are very specific in their design and context, the studies are generally explorative and evaluate the contextual conditions of these work sites to map challenges and injury risks that they might imply. Among the design process articles that we identified, in total there were 121. A lot of these studies were on processes and approaches. That means general tools, guidelines, or ways of doing design. These guidelines were either on a macro design level, for instance, how to design an office environment or a carpenter workshop. Some of the studies were on a meso design level. That means that looking at a specific workstation and not the holistic work site. And some studies were advices on how to design on a micro design level, for instance, how to design an input device such as this, or a mouse or a hammer. On the other hand, you see that, as we mentioned, there were quite a lot of studies that focus on participatory approaches, and that could be applied on any of these levels. And the focus of these studies have been either to identify problems within a given work environment by engaging employees, or to anticipate future needs of users or employees after a workplace change. And some of these studies focus on trying to create employee engagement and a sense of ownership and belonging as a result of engaging them in design processes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, and on the other hand, we also found a lot of methods and tools, basically recipes for how to do different parts of a design process. It could have been a phase, or it could have been an entire design process from idea to implementation. And you might be wondering here why we haven't counted the numbers that belong to these categories, and that's because quite a few of them overlap. Sometimes a method is presented alongside an approach, sometimes a process covers a number of tools, and we just kind of wanted to show what you can get out of this literature rather than quantify, because some of them are not mutually exclusive. So I thought that was worth mentioning. So among the methods and tools for designing a workplace and also evaluating it, we found a lot of standards and checklists that were described in scientific literature. We found modeling kind of trials of robot employee task divisions. And that's kind of an upcoming field that we find is being discussed more and more as the intelligence of robots is being developed. We found product evaluations as a design decision support, meaning that if you could get the right input to a design process about the usability and how well something matches user requirements, then that could be good input towards purchasing or deciding on a particular design. We found quite a few instances of simulations and using digital human models in order to evaluate different work environments using a human representation in the computer rather than testing things on real humans. We found a lot of work on anthropometric data, which says something about getting an idea of your user population before you start designing. And then I have to admit that there's a little square covering the last thing for me, so I'm going to have to just do a little trick here. There we go. There was also a portion of methods and tools for musculoskeletal disorder risk calculations. So essentially, we did get a number of methods that are quite simply ergonomics evaluation methods, but I dare say we didn't catch them all. And this is very much because we weren't targeting the kind of injury-focused or injury risk-focused body of literature. Some methods still made it into the sample, but I would say that our review is not a comprehensive coverage of that type of methods. Other authors that we have cited in our report, among others, Patrick Newman from Ryerson University and Peter Palm from Uppsala, they've both done really good overviews with comparisons of different methods, kind of similar to what Mikael talked about earlier today. So I would say that it came into our collection, but I would say it's just a taster menu. Okay. Apparently, we have to do it this way. Sorry. So this lands us in some insights and knowledge gaps to kind of widen our conclusions a bit. Most of the results that we found are at either the individual level, like looking at the individual worker, or the entire workplace, the macro level. So we recommend that more research focused on this meso level involving a workstation level, basically, should be a good unit of analysis to kind of get a little more holistic focus, but still get a little bit of the context in there. And we also found that workplace and equipment design is contextual. So one of the results of our literature and knowledge overview is that we can't tell you what to do in every given situation. It feels like our conclusion is that it's more meaningful to examine more deeply one occupation at a time, and possibly also including knowledge from similar occupations, but perhaps not limiting yourself simply to the salutogenic angle. There was limited research on how you can do product assessments to give advice for procurement and purchasing specifically, and we think that that is a fairly interesting area, particularly for Sweden that has very harsh procurement laws. There's limited studies on interactions with smart screens and other types of input devices where you are looking at the information and touching it and interacting with it, because we feel that that is a growing part of our everyday lives. And then there are some unexplored physical implications of using robots as colleagues, basically. We wrote work tools here, but essentially it's moving towards them taking a more active role. And as Minke mentioned earlier, that you have to kind of remember to combine the physical with the organizational and psychosocial. We also draw the conclusion that we need more studies with parallel assessment. So a lot has just been physical. We think it's interesting to combine cognitive and physical workload. That would be a knowledge gap worth pursuing. And also to look at different design proposals or design solutions alongside timing, basically temporal factors like scheduling, rotation, exposure, because to make a fair assessment of physical loading, you can't forget how much time you spend with the thing you're working with.
I just want to add 2 points to the previous slide. Regarding the temporal factors, one aspect that we observe is that a lot of studies have more short-term perspective and evaluate products and work sites from with short-term outcomes. And I think we need to highlight that there is a need for more research on longitudinal outcomes. That was one aspect that I think we should highlight here. And we also, you will see in our report that we have these 4 categories that we present, and we mentioned that it is more meaningful to examine each category more deeply, and we are interested and plan to synthesize the studies that we've identified for each category further in detail, as our report is more holistic in its current version. Some insights on design process literature. We mentioned earlier there is a lot of studies that highlight the role and importance of participatory processes for reaching workplace well-being. And a few studies highlight that these processes can go wrong. But we feel that there are very few studies that map barriers and pitfalls in design processes. Usually, design process literature focuses on how successful you get after conducting design. And I think we need to do more research highlighting barriers and pitfalls in design processes and participatory ones, not just, either of them. We think that there will be a growing body of studies, and there is a need for exploring applications of technological innovations such as wearables, such as digital twins to support design processes. And we have seen a couple of papers, but we think that there will be more of such studies. From a methodological view for conducting systematic literature reviews, we felt that there was no suitable method for appraising the quality of the design process literature that is within the ergonomics and human factors fields. These contributions are usually analytical and work with heuristics. That means that they come up with rules of thumbs for facilitating how to quickly screen workplace risks, for instance, and support designers in these processes. And there are actually no suitable quality appraisal tools for determining the quality of such articles, which was why we created our own version. We think that these tools should be developed further.
Yes. Okay, so that's our report, basically, and we want to thank the Swedish Agency for Work Environment Expertise for the opportunity. This was a lot of work, but also a lot of fun. We learned a ton, and here's our contact info if anyone would like to contact us directly. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Maral and Cecilia. I think we do it this way. We will ask Annette Nyland to give some comments on your speech and then your lecture. and I will present Annette Nylund, and she will present herself shortly. And after your discussion with Annette, we will read some questions we have had from the audience. We have had a few questions, and I guess we will receive some more if we wait some minutes. You stay with us another 10 minutes. We have time just to discuss with Annette and also answer some questions. Please, Annette Nylund, you are from the Swedish Agency for Environment, the Work Environment Expertise, and I'm sure you could present yourself with a few words and then post some comments on what we have heard. Please.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Annette Nylund and I work at the agency, and my role is to, most of all, facilitate evaluations and analyses effects of government reforms and initiatives. But this last year, I also been working to facilitate the process of the literature reviews, especially the brilliant one from Cecilia and Maral. And hello to you. We haven't seen, actually. We have been working together for almost a year, but we haven't seen each other. I'm also involved a little bit in other international issues. First, I would say that thank you for your brilliant presentation. You really helped us to understand the report. And I will also say that everyone that reads the report will see that there is such the same kind of brilliant way to lead the readers through the report and to understand the systematic review. It's very nice. And I will also say that you can write many reports based on these results, and maybe we also can, because it's so rich. So let's see. I have made some slides. See if I can. This is me, so I just go through it very quickly. First, I would like to say I think the report and your work is bold. Because you intentionally, as you also explained, excludes problem-focused research, even though this research is in this field, in musculoskeletal disorders, is very traditional and hardcore. So I think this is brilliant. It's out of sight. So better. That is the first thing. I think it's very bold and very nice. And it's also very interesting that you have a not so traditional definition of well-being, as you also explained. It is rather a continuum from bad to good as a journey. You explained that is from struggling to be better and recovering, such as less physical loading, less stress, less risk. To more outcomes such as satisfaction, engagement, problem solving, collaboration, creativity, and also organizations and their productivity and efficiency. I think this is a very interesting way to look upon these factors of well-being, as you say, well-being at the workplace. And you also introduce a holistic view of well-being when you focus on design of the workplace in combination with product evaluations, but also aspects like inclusion of old workers to retain competence, but also to support inclusion of young workers. And there are several other reports supporting that perspective. And you also look upon workers' participation, and I think it's of interest to see that you also say that this is very important for the workers, but it also might lead it's not leading towards the goal. But anyhow, it should be they should be involved. And you also have this individual and macro perspective, and I think that's very important that you have. And you also now introduced this meso perspective. And you also especially highlights some lack of research. There are only few studies addressing these temporal factors, as you mentioned, calling schedule rotation such as, and they are, as you described them, alternative strategies for achieving healthier levels of physical workload at work. And also multiple outcome based on both physical and mental loading, for example, and that would be of great interest to see more of in the future. And you also mentioned that everyone is talking about digital and new technology and the interface of physical workload. As we in Sweden say, MVG, VWD, very well done. Thank you. So this is the comments from my side.
Thank you, Annette. We proceed actually. Cecilia and Maral, you're still with us, I hope, because we have a few questions. This question is about the pandemic crisis we are within for the moment. It says like this: for the healthcare work, especially in the pandemic crisis we are within for the moment, how should you go deeper, and when could that be done? Do you have any plans how to do that? Because you're mentioning that you should sort of dig in deeper in some of the areas you describe. Is that possible with the pandemic situation we have in the world and in our country for the moment?
I mean, as a researcher in the field, you always have a responsibility not to disrupt. So I suppose that could be the relationship of trust that needs to happen between the researchers and these healthcare fields. And I am in contact with some healthcare actors right now for some master thesis work, and we're already on a kind of micro level dealing with this problem. Like, can they come and talk to you? Do you have enough time for them? Do you have any resources left over mentally to deal with a design question? And I suppose it has to be approached with respect for the fact that the healthcare really is primary. That has to happen without being disturbed. But there's so much knowledge to be gained from making it better and trying different solutions in a robust way. So I see a lot of potential there. But of course, the pandemic throws everything upside down for the moment.
Anyway, it sounds that if you don't have a complete plan now, you're planning to have a plan quite soon.
Pretty much.
Next question is about a redesigned working place. It's like this: if you redesign a working place, so make it sort of less dangerous, that it will decrease the risks of accidents. Will that workplace also be promoting the well-being for the people working there?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. As we mentioned, and also as Annette highlighted too, we see health as a continuum. Mm-hmm. And of course, when you remove risks, you are kind of in the middle of that continuum. But it doesn't have to be health promoting, because you still might need to. You might have other needs to reach a well-being level. That means there are so many aspects, such as meaningfulness and engagement, and that is not created only by removing the risks. So I wouldn't say that it happens automatically by removing risks. You need more strategies for achieving well-being.
It's not the whole story, quite simply.
Thank you. Next question. This is from a member of the audience saying, thank you for a well-written report, very interesting. There are some challenges though. There are some challenges how to, this was complicated. I have to read it through again. There are some challenges to map health factors and success factors in prevention MSD linked to healthcare and social workers. Could you say something about that?
I hope I understand correctly with social workers that it's people who give direct personal advice to people about their life.
I guess that's the correct interpretation. Yes.
Yeah, that was a complicated question.
Yes.
I hope we get it right. I would say that that type of work is a kind of knowledge work. So perhaps the physical aspect of it tends to be sedentary and so on. But I also know that they move around and visit their clients and so on. I would say that remember that we've chosen a salutogenic design perspective in our report. So there has been a bit of frustration on our part on how much good knowledge has fallen off the wagon because we have kind of moved away from the prevention perspective. But I would say social work perhaps is not, that would be a perfect candidate for this idea of looking at research combining mental and physical loading, I think, because it would be unfair to focus entirely on the physical or entirely on the psychosocial, I think. It wouldn't do them justice. I don't know if that answers the question, but...
I guess so. We hope so. If not, I guess the questioner could come back to you in Gothenburg and with further questions and asking for further answers. I'm sure that will be all right. We have no further questions for the moment, but as I said, there will probably pop up some. And
can I add one thing, Sten?
Yes, please.
Annette mentioned before that there's a lack of research on temporal factors as a strategy. The thing is, there's not actually a lack of that type of research in itself, but there is a lack of it together with design solutions. So just to nuance it a little bit.
Thank you for that explanation. Thank you, Annette, for your comments. Thank you, Maral and Cecilia, for your lecture. And we will go on. Thank you very much. We will meet you, for those of the audience that will be here in the afternoon, we will meet at least Cecilia further. Thank you very, very much. I have some formality to tell. First of all, all these reports that the Swedish Agency for Work Environment Expertise are putting together, they will be translated into English, and they will also be found on the website of our host. So, of course, those that you heard of today, but also other reports and studies made in this country that is, will be found there. So please, to our audience outside Sweden, you can find a lot of interesting stuff there. Go into the website, and you probably could dig in a library of deep knowledge there. Secondly, this webinar will be transmitted after the webinar. Maybe not this afternoon, but in a few days you will find it. If you would like to review it all, or if you would tell a colleague to follow the discussions we have had here today. Well, for the moment, we are ending the morning show. So I welcome Michael and Minke and Annette that you have met before. We will all be here in the studio. We will try to keep some kind of coronavirus secure distances. And we will discuss what we have heard. So the question to you is there anything that you would like to mention that's been of certain interest? Or is it anything that you remember that's been very, very something I didn't know anything about at all, something new? Who would like to start? Annette, would you like to start? Is there anything that you have heard during the speeches that you would like to mention, certain interest?
I think this is a very diplomatic answer. I think everything has been of great interest, and I'm especially pleased that we also have statistics on this seminar. I think it's a very strong tool to show what you want to describe, and also to that's as Michael did, that described that you need to be careful how you measure things. You often have to combine different aspects. I think that's of also great importance. Better tools for measurements.
Better tool. Thank you. Minke, what's your impression from the morning? Something you would like to mention?
Yeah, well, I think I'm really impressed of all different speakers addressing the MSD issues in different ways, but still, so you can recognize yourself in the different parts, bits and pieces. And I think the statistics introduction was just a very short introduction, but was leading towards the combination of MSDs and occupational social factors and how they influence each other. And I think also Michael and Cecilia and Maral were addressing this. I think that's really a big part, which is very, very interesting and also very challenging, how to find methods where we really can measure both the two together and also get a balance in the information. That is still quite something to be done, but I think it feels really satisfactory to hear that everybody's concerning this issue and working for development there. Thanks.
Michael, you have had good reviews on your report and your lecture. But what would you like to say about the morning hours, what you have heard here?
I'm very satisfied with these different parts, and I also think that the statistics is very evident and marks the importance of our to do things like this and to work and to develop, and also to as we heard from Göteborg, to research into slightly different parts of this large field. And I forgot to, or I did not mention correctly or fully, that those observational methods are also good in the way that they cover, you can make them cover all different factors. Then if you do measurements, you kind of have to decide what you like to measure. But before that, you should cover and see what do I need to measure. So I think that is a need for those observational methods as well.
Could I add something? Because I have interesting time to read the cases I think Minke told us about. Heart-beating, I must say. Horrifying in one way. Very, very interesting. And also you mentioned that an ordinary flat screen or iPads thing would be next field for research, how that could provoke us. That's also very interesting and new to me. Thank you very much for this summarizing discussion.
I had one thing from Pernille on the way in.
Please.
If we as we do, we tell people and we teach and we are not taught how to move during short breaks. How is the motivation among the average employee to do that? They cannot do that already.
No,
Is there lacking? It was that this teaching was that there was lacking. Will they move more now?
After today.
After today, yes.
Everybody listening.
I hope, do you mean the exercise that Sophia told us and showed us?
Yes.
Will we exercise more in our office?
Yeah.
I hope we will.
Now after we heard Sophia.
Yes, I hope we will. She told us very simple examples how to do that and how easy it is, and also the importance of frequency when it comes to making this simple exercise. Yeah, I'm sure we and the audience of about 400 people in Europe will do that a lot more in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
And thank you, the audience, for listening to us. Again, I told you we are about 400 people together today, and we have spectators, part of our audience in Spain. We have others in Cyprus. We have spectators and part of our audience in Iceland. So we're covering almost all Europe, actually. So we are impressed, and we are very happy to have so many spectators listening and viewing us this morning. This will end the English part of the webinar. We will continue after lunch break with a Swedish part, and we have other lectures telling us more interesting details about this. For you who stay with us and come back, the next part will start at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Please log in a few minutes before. Use the same login you used this morning. So, to you leaving us, thank you very much for attending the show, and for you having lunch break. Please be most welcome back at few minutes before 1 o'clock.